Okay, I'm so happy to be with you all today. This is going to be a really, really deep dive into codependency and how you can actually heal and break free and move towards really happy, healthy, and secure relationships. And so this is going to be a longer video. I'm going to get into a lot today. I'll cover what codependency is, how you can spot this in relationships, and how you can heal and move forward in your life. And so I highly suggest grabbing a notebook, maybe pausing this, and yeah, just taking notes. And you can also watch this video multiple times. There's going to be a lot of information. And so maybe you want to just watch it straight through the first time, come back to it another time, take notes, whatever you need to do, but there's going to be a lot of information today. And I'm really excited to get into this because codependency is the most common thing that I see in my private practice with clients, especially with female clients. Men also struggle with codependency as well, but I tend to work mostly with women, and the statistics do show that women are more susceptible to codependency. This is something that I've also overcome in my own life, and it took me some time in my younger years to really even know what codependency was and how I was actually really displaying some of these characteristics. And as I'll be getting into today, so much of this is just really programmed into our culture. It's modeled to us by, movies, media, our parents, just everything around us is really modeling codependency. And so many of us just think this is love, and this is not love, and it's not healthy. And so I can't wait to help you to understand the difference between healthy relationships and codependency and how we can start to move forward, because this is something that we need to really transcend collectively in order to step into the next level of relationships, which I teach so much about these higher forms of relationships that are available to us right now. In this day and age, we are primed and ready to step into highly conscious relationships in addition to spiritual partnership. But we need to first have a base that's really strong and solid. And that base is secure attachment and interdependency and not codependency. So I can't wait to get into all this today. So let's just dive in. Today, I'll be covering what codependency is, how it shows up in relationships, and how to break free. And by the way, if you are new to my work, if you are not familiar with me, my name is Leigh-Anne. I'm a psychologist based in Los Angeles, and I work with people all over the world. I'm also a relationship coach and a breathwork teacher. And yeah, if you need support, please reach out, ask questions. You can also book a free consultation call. There's going to be a lot today that I'm going to cover. So just keep notes if you have any questions. Just know that you're more than welcome to reach out, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So before we get started today, just wanted to share kind of this, I guess you could say, zoomed out perspective way beyond just maybe typical psychologist views on codependency. And this goes hand in hand with a larger body of work that I call the War on Love, Sex, and Relationships. So this is something that some of you watching have heard me speak about before. I'm actually working on a book to kind of outline all of the different facets of this kind of agenda to erode healthy relationships. There's so many different parts to it. And so codependency programming, I really do see that it's part of this bigger agenda to prevent people from reaching wholeness. And so as long as we feel this internal deficit or void that we seek externally to fill, which is basically the root of codependency, then we carry a sense of deficiency that interferes with our ability to internally develop to our fullest potential. Because if you walk around feeling like you have a void inside of you, then you're always going to be operating from a sense of low self-worth, low self-love, and you're always going to be seeking externally. This is where it can lead to addictions. And so here I kind of make the correlation. Codependency is very, very correlated with love addictions and relationship addictions, especially. Sometimes it can also be tied into sex addictions as well. These things can overtake and derail people's lives. So all of this I'm going to get into as we go forward today. I'm going to specifically be talking about the addiction component of this. And so codependency, like the root of it, is really programmed into us by childhood trauma, ancestral family patterns, and cultural conditioning. The vast majority, oh my goodness, of people need to deprogram from codependency. So this is not something that I want anybody to feel bad about or to have shame around. I would estimate 98% of the people that I work with have to unravel from codependency. So there's no shame. There's no shame. This is just information for you. And, in my own life, having humility and just admitting, wow, I don't really know how to do relationships in a healthy way, took me a lot of humility to just admit that. But from that point to just be like, wow, I need support with relationships because I wasn't really ever taught this stuff. There's no shame in that. And I actually think it's a very, very courageous thing to admit that. So this is learned behavior. And so it can be unlearned, which is very important. So codependency is really having an excessive dependence on another person or love or relationships, having this excessive dependence on these things really due to low self-esteem and a lack of boundaries. So it's an unhealthy relationship dynamic that can cause an inability to cope without the other person, let's just say you're in a relationship, or an inability to cope without having a partner, without constantly being dating or, in and out of relationships. It can also cause, when you are engaging with this other person, a loss of self and enmeshment, which is basically just merging of two people and a loss of your own identity. And it can also it's also correlated with this compulsive caretaking of the other person. So usually people who have codependent tendencies tend to be givers, helpers, fixers, and they, in their conscious awareness, all they want to do is help other people. They often put their own needs to the side and make everybody else's kind of problems their own. And I'm going to get way, way deeper into that as we go on. So as I said before, love and relationship addiction is correlated here in addition to anxious attachment. So, these are all similar words for the same thing. So when I say codependency, anxious attachment, love addiction, relationship addiction, these are all kind of the same thing. And so you might have noticed with all these terms being thrown around, you might have already noticed that there's a connection between all of these. So we're going to get deeper into all of this as we go on. So Pia Melody, who is an expert on codependency and addictions, I recommend her books at the end here. She actually uses this term codependency in a much more kind of generalized way to kind of label it as a pattern of behaviors or internal states of being that we carry as individuals that then can apply to relationships, but also can actually affect pretty much everything in our life. So it can also affect our career. It can affect our friendships. It can affect our relationship with ourselves. It can affect our, self-care, pretty much everything. And so she actually kind of pulls out this term codependency, and she looks at how this pattern or this cluster of behaviors that we carry internally end up affecting all areas of our lives. And then when she talks about how it affects romantic relationships, she specifically calls it love addiction or relationship addiction. So I just wanted to share that because if you do check out some of the books at the, at the end, then it's good to just understand that she differentiates these two things. So the next few slides, I'm really going to get into different signs that you're codependent, different behaviors that are associated with this. And so I just first want to make a note that it's really a spectrum. It's not either I am codependent or I'm not codependent. It's really a spectrum. And it's very common to have codependent tendencies, somewhere along this spectrum. And so the first one is that you tend to lose yourself in relationships. And so you end up, with a partner who you end up usually putting them on a pedestal and thinking they're the best thing ever. You tend to be overly influenced and take on your partner's beliefs, their opinions, their hobbies, etc. And so you really kind of shrink your own sense of self and diminish your own separateness from this person. And you end up just blending with them. And this is definitely one of the major signs of codependency. The second one here, your emotions are very tied to your partners. And so all these are kind of, all of these relate together. And so when your partner is happy, so are you. When they're down, so are you. It's just there's this enmeshment where it's very difficult for you to be in your own energy, strong and solid, separate from this person. And, again, the third point here, it feels like you're enmeshed, right? So you're just, the energies of these two people are just totally blended rather than two separate beings. The fourth one here, you project dreams for eternal happiness onto your partner. And so you're just projecting kind of this fantasy image of this person who you expect to just come into your life and make everything better. This person is going to take away all of your problems, all of your unhappiness. They are the missing piece in your life that you have been waiting for. And so this can be very, very tricky. We're going to get more into this as we go on. The fact that a lot of people who are codependent don't have a network of family, friends, or supportive people around them kind of makes it so that it's so easy for them to over rely on this one person for emotional support. And I just wanted to pause on this one and say that even if you are somebody that maybe does have a strong network around you, of people, or maybe you think, yeah, I do have, quite a lot of friends and people that I keep in touch with. I have seen people who are codependent that, although that might be true, when they get into a relationship, they overly fixate on this one person and this other person starts to really fill their time. And so a lot of times they actually end up pulling away from all of these other relationships, at least temporarily, while they're in the relationship. And so this is very, very common. Another kind of sign here that you might be codependent, although it's not always the case, especially what I just shared as well, is that sometimes you feel misunderstood, like you don't often connect with people. You might feel like a loner. These people, if they do find somebody out there that they really fall for, then this also, the danger here is also that they're going to over rely, over fixate on this one person. Another sign of codependency that's really, really not just widespread, but also being talked about quite a bit these days is these people pleaser tendencies of really just kind of overly relying on this external validation, or, always seeking externally to make sure that everybody likes you, everybody is, happy with you. And ultimately what's happening is that your self-worth, which should come from within, right? We shouldn't need to constantly have proof from the external world that we're worthy and that we should love ourselves. But what's happening in codependency is that the person's self-worth is being sourced externally. And then when they stop getting these hits of approval from the outside world, they actually can really, really struggle, and it can have a detrimental effect on their self-worth, their self-love. Another sign that you may be codependent is that you're looking for somebody to complete you. This is something that especially women are totally programmed to believe this. And even though over the past, 50 years, 50 plus years, women have become more independent and all of these things in the world, it's still so common for the women that I see and work with in my private practice to have this feeling that if they don't have a partner or if they don't have a relationship, that they are not complete, something is wrong with them, they must be bad, they must be unlovable. This is very, very, very much programmed into us. And it's one that I really, really would love for us to move past, because this is absolutely not true, especially because as we get into how you can start to overcome codependency, the treatment for this, which, it's multi-layered, one of the treatments is to really be able to be happy alone, to be able to fill your sense of self-love and self-worth internally, not based on the external world, and to understand that you are whole and complete internally. And, this can even get to some of the more advanced stages of working with some of my clients, is that we actually do this work to look at where they're at in terms of their spiritual development, personal development, in terms of their wholeness. And, I might have time later to get into what that looks like specifically, but certainly on sort of a general level, if you feel like you have a void inside of you and you're looking for somebody else to come into your life and make everything better, this is a big, big sign that you're codependent. And the last one here is you can't function without the other person. So this is the over-dependency. Okay, so this first one about you might complain about how your partner's treating you, but then you stay with them anyway. This is one that I know through and through, because for those of you who don't know my story, me as a psychologist shifting into specialization in love, sex, and relationships was only born out of my own pain and suffering in this area. So about 10 years ago, my marriage completely collapsed. It was the darkest time of my life. It started a 2-year cycle that was absolutely my rock bottom in life. And, I'm not going to get too deep into it now, but, he and I were together almost 20 years. We have a child together. And this first bullet point here was the story of my life. I mean, the whole time, even from the very beginning, he just, I knew that, he wasn't treating me in the way that I deserved to be treated. And yet I stayed with him. I stayed with him. And yes, I tried to have conversations. I tried to bring things up. We tried to work on it, but ultimately he never took any of these things seriously. And he never showed me that he was willing to take a stand for us, really do the heavy lifting to save the relationship. And yet, time and time again, even though I tried, seeing that he, wasn't stepping up to the plate, I had it in my mind that there was no way that I was ever going to get divorced. This is because, my mother and father got divorced when I was small, and I just swore that that would never be me. And what I see now is that's a lot of that is ego. And so even though, people hear, oh, wow, like you were together almost 20 years, it was kind of like this sign of respect. It's not always a good thing when you stay in relationships for way longer than you should. In fact, many people who are codependent do get stuck, and they find it very, very hard to actually leave partners who don't treat them very well. There are some people that I work with that I need to really, really, help them quite a bit to unravel from this. And it's not something that's just as easy as saying, oh yeah, this person doesn't treat me very well, and so therefore I'm, going to end it and move on. It's like, for many people who are codependent, it's a really hard thing to do. And when we move into talking about where this all comes from and how you can start to heal, you might understand better why it's so difficult to actually move on. But it is possible. This is also a huge one. It feels safer or better for you to actually be a giver than to allow yourself to receive. This is huge, huge, huge. And when we speak more about where this pattern comes from, especially with the childhood and the family component of where we really learn this, I'm going to get way more into this one. People who struggle with codependency are often, always the one with friends, family, other people. They're always the one who's on call, who's, the one that you can call whenever. They will drop whatever's going on and immediately, go and help anyone, anytime. And this honestly might seem like such an incredible attribute. And this is part of the programming, right? We're taught that this is what makes you a good person, right? When you do this. But unfortunately, this is a person that doesn't have very good boundaries. I'm not saying that when a crisis happens, right, that you're not someone who's going to, put everything to the side and show up for somebody. But this is somebody who, 24/7 just constantly is involved with other people, putting out all these fires. And, we're going to get way more into this pattern of being kind of a caretaker and a fixer at your own expense. Another sign you might be codependent is that you seem to attract needy people into your life. These are kind of tied together. And sometimes you feel like people don't appreciate you or they take from you without reciprocity. And so it can kind of be something where we end up kind of co-creating these dynamics with other people because we actually unconsciously are attracted to needy people so that we can be caretakers, right? I'm going to get way more into this as we go on. But then sometimes we also complain because we feel like we're being a martyr and that everyone is taking from us. And our relationships aren't reciprocal. Some people do notice that and they complain about it. But what they don't understand, because they have trouble looking at themselves, is that they're actually creating the situation. So the last one here, you're in denial or you lie to yourself about the reality of your partnership or certain relationships. So all these are kind of tied together. I'm going to get more into denial now. So denial can be really, really big when it comes to codependency, and there's so many reasons why. But denying the problem or using avoidance or distraction type behaviors can be common with codependent tendencies. So this is a great quote here. It is characteristic of the dependent personality to ignore signs of problems, to examine as little as possible, and to endure. So, this word for me, endure, really sticks out. And yeah, really makes me flash back to that incredibly long time that I stayed in that particular relationship. And I don't want anybody to have to endure anything, especially relationships that are not healthy. And unfortunately, like I said earlier, it can be very hard to walk away from these relationships, even if you know that they're not good for you. It can be very easy to slip into denial, which is a defense mechanism, really, to kind of keep us protected from actually seeing the reality of the situation with clear eyes, because if we did, it would be very overwhelming. And it was absolutely overwhelming in my own life because all of a sudden I was, in my mid 30s at this point. We already had a child together. And yeah, the shit hit the fan in that relationship. And, it just, it was such a great gift. In retrospect, I'm able to say that because I am a completely different person now. It changed my life completely. This all went down 10 years ago. And yet after that 2-year period of darkness, oh my goodness, I mean, I was forced to face all of my shadows, everything in my life that had co-created that relationship with my ex had to be examined because I didn't have any choice. This is just how it played out in our lives. And it felt like absolutely a personal crisis at that time. So I always say it really felt like it was against my will that I had to really, look underneath the surface at everything that was going on, not just in our day to day and in our marriage, but also, of course, really digging deep into what even caused us to show up in relationships this way to begin with. So the dynamic with he and I was very codependent. It's the classic situation where the woman is settling for less than she deserves. The other person is, not fully showing up in the relationship. They're not emotionally available. They don't really understand how to, love properly. There was a lot of disrespectful behavior. There was a lot of immaturity. We did meet when we both were very, very young. But there was so much going on in that relationship where, yeah, it just wasn't being treated in the way that I deserved. And I got to look at the fact that internally, my levels of self-love and self-worth were so low that I was choosing to settle because I honestly believed back then that there was nobody else. There was nobody else for me. And I totally put him on a pedestal and thought he was the best thing in the world. And thankfully now, 10 years out of the woods, we are both very different people and are co-parenting well. And so that can happen as well when both people actually are forced to face their stuff. But wow, it was just an opportunity for me to really look at the fact that I needed to heal my relationship with myself. My self-love and self-worth were so low that I really didn't believe that I could have anything better. And, I had no boundaries. I had very low standards. I was one of those women that just was kind of like the cool girl who, like, I don't need very much. And, even in my younger years, I remember um, kind of making fun of other women who had, in my eyes, high standards in relationships. And, were kind of like a problem for men. And of course, this was all based on my own stuff, and all of this stuff was poking all of my unhealed wounds internally, which I know now, but I didn't realize that then. And so when you show up in relationships where you just don't have very many needs and your standards are low, then that's how other people are going to treat you. So it was a very, very hard pill for me to swallow, to say the least. But when I realized that, when my therapist back then was able to gently show me that, although I could say absolutely that he was kind of doing all these things to me that were disrespectful, that didn't feel good, that didn't feel loving, and had no idea what my part was in it, she gently helped me to see that all relationships are co-created, two people coming together, bringing all of their stuff to the table. And it was still very hard for me to accept that and understand what she meant. But finally, I realized that my part was that I really didn't have a very high level of confidence internally. And so therefore, I was staying and staying and staying and staying with him. And there really were no consequences. I had very weak boundaries, if, yeah, no boundaries at all. I had, you know, just a low level of standards in relationships in general. It wasn't just with him. So these were all of the things that I was bringing to the table to co-create the situation. And so at this point, 10 years later, I've been working as a psychologist now for 13 years, specializing in relationships now for, probably 7, 8 years now. And me going through all of that, having to walk through the fire and heal myself, is exactly why I specialize in relationships now. And so at this point, I've worked with over 1,000 people and have realized that this problem is so widespread. And it often even though we all have our own unique stories, a lot of these patterns play out in very, very textbook ways, which is wild to me. And yes, I always respect everyone's individual journeys, but there are bigger collective patterns, and even just patterns in all of our lives that play out and are very, very similar, which is pretty incredible. So if you have any denial around codependence, or if you are feeling down, about maybe understanding it's time for you to make some changes in relationships, then, tell yourself that it's not too late for you to make changes in your life. This is absolutely 100% true. I felt like, as I was edging towards my late 30s, I was just so down in the dumps. I was like, this relationship is coming to an end. I am a single mother. I'm literally never going to find someone again. And all of these thoughts are normal. And I wish they weren't normal, because none of them are true. And so the work that I had to do to heal myself, heal my relationship wounds, learn about healthy relationships, start to put skills in practice in my life, has completely transformed my whole life and my whole career and my friendships, right? And my partnerships. And so everything is completely different in my life. And every little step forward is worth it. And I also believe on a bigger level, these things are soul lessons, and we're meant to actually learn some of these things the hard way. Okay. And so it's never too late for you to make changes in your life. And it's okay that you're not perfect. Literally, nobody's perfect. And it's okay for you to need help with relationships. I truly believed back then that I was the only person who didn't know how to actually have healthy relationships. For whatever reason back then, I was convinced that I was the only person who didn't know how to have healthy relationships. And that was such a lie. It was so wrong, because nobody really knows how to do relationships well. I think we know this more now. This was 10 years ago when not many people were talking about it. But when I looked at all of our friends who were married, everybody seemed to be fine. Nobody was really talking about difficulties like this. And I can assure you that the vast majority of people actually struggle with relationships. I know that now, especially after working with thousands of people. And also, kind of as I slowly back then started to share little bits and come forward, with friends, or, I was running women's circles at the time, I still do now. As I started to come forward and share little bits, which I had so much shame around the fact that my relationship was coming to an end. But as I started to share little bits, every single woman that I was speaking with was like, I totally know what you're talking about. So I promise you, you're not the only one. And if you're here watching this, I already know that you're somebody that takes responsibility for your life, that you're interested in changing, that you're interested in growing. And maybe even just watching this will start to create shifts internally for you. There's anything literally is possible. You can absolutely have a better life. Relationships are co-created. I can own my part. Other people can own theirs. I want to pause on this one for just a second, because what I see happening with this is that there's a couple of different kind of polar opposite ways that this can play out. Either somebody in a relationship is completely not owning their stuff, and they're pointing the finger and they're blaming everything at the other person, or they are taking all the responsibility onto themselves and taking over responsibility, which then further fuels their self-hatred, low self-worth, all this stuff. So this is a really important point, because the reality of the situation is that all relationships are co-created. There's two people coming together. And so there's always two people who need to take responsibility. I take responsibility for my part. You take responsibility for your part. Okay, this is very important. And also this last one, I don't have to give myself away or be self-sacrificing in order to love or be loved. Okay, so these are all signs of kind of being a relationship addict, a love addict. All of this is kind of correlated to with anxious attachment. Disorganized attachment is less spoken about, but this is something I recovered from. Disorganized attachment is when you have a little bit of both. You have a little bit of anxious attachment and a little bit of avoidant attachment. Okay, so I don't want to leave out those of you who might have disorganized attachment as well. And so I just want to pause here and say, I kind of spoke to this a little bit before, but none of these terms I want you to use to, slap a label on yourself, tell yourself that you're bad or broken. This is just information. And I'm going to just say that relationship addiction and love addiction is so common that I actually wish these words were used more often, because it's just another way of saying codependency, and codependency is literally everywhere. Okay, so please don't, the word addiction is very charged. I understand that, but I just want to give you the information so that you can understand and start to kind of zoom out and connect the dots when you start to hear about some of this stuff. And so none of this is anything that you should use to beat yourself up. Okay, I'm going to say that probably 10 more times. So relationship addiction is when you're often magnetically pulled to romantic partners, especially ones who aren't good for you. Okay, this is the common classic thing with, especially with women, where women are kind of attracted to the bad boys. I'm going to link a podcast episode that I did on that very topic. I think it's called Why Women Are Pulled to Bad Boys or something. That episode's good to listen to. It goes way more into it. And this can happen with men too. Men can definitely be attracted to women who are kind of troubled as well. And then this part right here about it's hard for you to be single. Being in a relationship actually boosts your self-esteem, and it's hard for you to be alone and be kind of with yourself. This can definitely be a characteristic of relationship addictions. I have some people I'm working with now who are realizing that as adult women, in their 30s and 40s, they're realizing, oh my gosh, I haven't ever had a period of my life where I've been single for very long, because it's sort of like once one relationship ends, then they get into another one and another one and another one. And in a perfect world, we actually use the ending of a relationship and a period of recuperation to heal from the relationship ending, in addition to doing our inner work to start to break patterns and heal wounds. And every single relationship that you have been in can provide the material for you to use to spot unhealed wounds and to be able to really understand how you can show up in your next relationship in a more healed way. That's getting into using relationships consciously, which is kind of a higher level. But for now, just notice if it's hard for you to be single. And I spoke about this one earlier, but you find it difficult to leave a relationship even when you know it's not healthy or it's not going very well. Relationship addiction, and people who struggle with this are often attracted to partners who are not emotionally available, or maybe they're literally unavailable, like they are married or they're just not available for a relationship. This one is a really big one. So a lot of times people with relationship addictions, when a kind, available partner is someone that they meet through dating or comes into their life, this person actually seems boring to them, either consciously or unconsciously. And they prefer drama, intensity, fireworks, and all of this is either, in their conscious awareness. Sometimes it's not even in their conscious awareness, okay? But this is one that so many of the women that I work with can relate to this one. And I speak about this in more detail in the podcast episode I'm going to link to in the description of this video. Another characteristic is that you often try to fix or save your partners, seeking to change them into your ideal partner or, whatever your fantasy is. This also ties into, rescuing, caretaking, mothering partners. Oh my gosh, this is such a big one. This is such a big one. And when I think about just the collective relationship between men and women now, this is one that is so big and it's so common for women to do this, that it's one of the number one issues that we as women need to really overcome collectively, because on the collective level, it's actually co-creating a dynamic with men that is not good. So it can either cause men to actually become dependent on us, and then they're not able to step up to the plate in their lives. And some men actually do end up getting in this situation. They don't even really understand what's happening. Other men do feel it and they don't like it and they feel smothered, and they have an association that women are just like this. And so they're getting very fed up with women overall for doing this. I'm going to get way, way, way more into this caretaking characteristic when I move into the part about where this all comes from in a little bit. Okay, so it's hard for you to say no to other people. You have weak boundaries. You're kind of over giving for approval, which this part here, doing it for approval, so sneaky, so hidden. Most people that I work with do not realize consciously that they're actually always giving, helping. And underneath it, it's because they're seeking approval, they're seeking validation, they're seeking self-worth. Lots of people do not realize consciously. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear. Underneath it all, you actually don't believe that you deserve a healthy relationship. Again, this can be conscious or it can be unconscious. Although some women that I work with in my private practice actually will tell me straight up, I don't believe I deserve a healthy relationship. There's other women who actually will tell me, yes, I know I deserve a healthy relationship. But then their actions and their behaviors and their actual relationships in their lives, when we actually look at them, those don't match. Okay, the relationships that they actually get in are, yeah, it's not, they actually underneath it unconsciously don't believe that they deserve a healthy relationship. This is why it's really, really important to work with a psychologist, a therapist, a professional who understands the difference between conscious and unconscious. If you know anything about this, the conscious level of awareness, what is in our awareness, is literally just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what is really driving our life. The unconscious is directing the whole show. 95% of our lives are actually being driven by unconscious, unhealed wounds, patterns from childhood, programming, conditioning. All of this stuff in the unconscious is what's really driving the show, especially in relationships. And so the only way that you're going to be able to find out what's going on in your unconscious is by working with somebody that can actually show you your blind spots. Okay, we call these your blind spots because you literally can't see what's in your unconscious. So it's very important to be able to work with a professional. So this last one, you're obsessive or infatuated with the relationship, believing that only this one person can make you happy. This is a combination of childhood trauma and then also programming. Especially women, we're always taught that we need to find our soulmate, our one, right? Our one person. And this is just so much to put on another person. And so this kind of infatuation aspect can be very common with relationship addicts and with people with anxious attachment. Okay, this is another big one here. Love or relationships become your drug. You become over involved, overly dependent on connection and enmeshed. This is a really big one. This is when it really starts to show the addictive kind of quality of it. You might need to have others behave in a certain way so that you're happy or you're okay. Your happiness is totally dependent on their behavior. This kind of ties into what I was saying before, that sort of your partner's behavior, their moods impact you so much that you might become, this bullet point right here, overtly or secretly controlling of other people. Okay, this actually starts to get into some of the real hidden unconscious stuff that's running with codependent individuals, because so many of us we would, like, back then when I was running this in my relationship, I would never ever have admitted to controlling somebody. Okay, that these words have very negative connotations. Manipulating other people. Oh my gosh. I can't tell you how difficult it was for me to accept the fact that when my therapist gently told me that when you're people pleasing, you're actually manipulating other people because you're not showing up as your true self and you're acting in a certain way to sort of get approval. Oh my goodness. These are words that are very repulsive to people who have codependent tendencies, who might be compassionate, givers, empathic, all these things. It's really funny because if you think about the empath narcissist dynamic, which is something I talk about a lot, and I don't love labels, but these are just ways of describing people. And when the empath is actually secretly controlling other people, it's funny because these words like control and manipulation, often we put these on the other person, like the folks who may display more narcissistic characteristics. But it's actually happening on both sides. It's more covert and secret with the sort of empath, codependent person, because it's more in the shadow. It's more in the unconscious. Whereas sometimes with people who have narcissistic characteristics, it can be more overt. And then you have this other point here. You have assigned yourself the task of solving everyone's problems. And so again, you're getting your self-confidence from being the fixer or the rescuer. And this is something that I've debated with people who are recovering, who still are they're kind of in denial about this. And they will swear up and down that there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with being this way. And yet they're exhausted all the time. They have no boundaries. They're not in any healthy relationships. And so there is a way for all of these things to come into a healthy middle ground. Okay, there's a way for you to honor perhaps your natural, innate, caring qualities without completely running yourself into the ground. So that's actually part of when I get to kind of how to heal from this, we're going to be talking a lot about how can you actually hit this sort of healthy middle way in your relationships. This is a big part of it. And that is also basically describing secure attachment. Relationship addiction can also be difficult because when you try to break the addiction to other people, to relationships, there can be discomfort and withdrawal, just like as if you were, abusing substances. So it's pretty wild. And also, I just want to make a note that all of this, everything that I've talked about so far, can actually happen with any relationship. It doesn't have to be romantic. Usually with romantic relationships, those are the ones that are kind of more like charged, like they have a lot of weight in the person's life. However, I do see codependency happening in parenting as well. This is a big, big topic. I should probably do a separate video on that, but parents as well can be codependent with their children and become very over-involved and enmeshed in their lives. And that actually is causing a lot of problems, lots of problems. I've spoken about this before, but I just wanted to make a note of that. Okay, so for the women, the classic way this shows up in relationships between men and women is that the woman invests her entire well-being into fixing a man. This is still literally so common. I can't even tell you. She's drawn to troubled men with addictions, emotional unavailability, men who are abusive and controlling. All of this, these are kind of all on a spectrum. Okay, so even if you're not like, oh my God, he's not that at all, then you might see that there's certain things unconsciously about him that you're drawn to because there's something that needs attention, or there's a certain aspect of neediness or that you want to fix unconsciously. And I love this quote here. She's essentially abdicating her personal dignity and rights in service of the relationship, denying her own needs and catering to the needs of others, plagued by low self-esteem, and finding her worth in the drama of others. Okay, this is a great quote that Jody Hayes shares about her own life in the book Smart Love, which is a classic book on codependency and how to heal from it. I, at the end of this presentation, give you resources. This is one of them. So she says, I learned that my extreme generosity was not always motivated by noble intentions. Often, I gave to others to gain their approval and acceptance and to boost my self-esteem. I learned that part of my need for privacy and for a sense of self-containment was generated by my poor self-image. I just didn't want anyone to become aware of my typical human flaws. I learned how my unwillingness to let anyone see me locked out the possibility of genuine intimacy. No one can love someone they don't know, and no one knew me. Just want to pause on this for a second. So oftentimes, because this dynamic exists in people who give, but they find it so hard to receive. These are people that have such a difficult time letting their guard down, allowing themselves to be messy, needy, imperfect. And these are the people that find it so hard to actually soften and allow other people to take care of them. Okay, so this is kind of what she's saying here. I just didn't want anyone to become aware of my typical human flaws. It's almost like these people put on this facade that they kind of know it all, right? There's nothing about them that needs help, but yet they are always rushing to other people to help. The inability to actually soften, admit that you're a human being with flaws, and that sometimes you need support and help is very, very difficult. And it's a muscle that you can build. So you can actually start to practice receiving, and you can start to practice allowing relationships to become more balanced and reciprocal. And so in addition with my clients to going back to the childhood wounds that caused this, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, I also actually give people practices and exercises to do in their life now. And one of them is to start to practice receiving support and help. And so this is a big one. So she goes on to say, I learned that my over-involvement in my lover's life, my worrying about his problems and feeling his pain, was not merely due to my sympathetic nature. It was a way for me to avoid getting my own life together, to stop focusing on my own needs and feelings. Loving him too much meant not loving myself enough. Really, really good book. I highly recommend it. So the destructive cycle of codependency, love addiction, or even you could say the anxious attached person with the avoidant attached person, these are all kind of describing the same things. It starts with a powerful magnetic pull towards somebody, that electric spark, right? That chemistry that's through the roof, which can then become obsessive. This person becomes the answer to all of your problems, and you project eternal happiness, love onto them. They are your one, your soulmate, and you make them your everything. So dependency develops, obsessive, addictive behavior begins to interrupt your life. A total preoccupation with this person starts to interfere with work, friendships, motherhood, self-care, etc. Then the other person often begins to feel the weight of this obsession, and the relationship starts to deteriorate. Now, there's other ways that this could actually play out that I'll get into in a little bit. But then the codependent person's physical and emotional well-being can start to suffer. It could actually lead to serious illnesses. And if the relationship ends, another addictive relationship begins. So just be aware that when you're excessively dependent on one person without having other people in your life, or without continuing to tend to these other friendships, relationships, family relationships, your energy becomes exclusively directed at this other person or your partner if you actually are in a relationship with them. It's very, very unhealthy. Nobody should be directing all of their energy at one person. It's way too much. For most people, it's going to feel very smothering and uncomfortable. And so you see this in the classic anxious attached person with the avoidant attached person, is that it's like this person's coming and then this person's like, whoa, this is way too much. And it feels like a lot. I've actually had this, I've experienced this in my own life, not just in romantic partnerships, but also with friendships, where it feels very smothering. And so I can see it right away, when this is playing out. And so some people, though, actually like it. They like all of the attention. These are the more sort of energy vampire, narcissistic folks. They know that you're dependent on them and that they can control you, either consciously or unconsciously. They're sort of, they have a sense of this. So I'll say that again. They either are aware of this and they like it, or they're not aware, but they also like it unconsciously, if that makes sense. The third situation here that I see sometimes is that the other person might be so self-absorbed or an addict that you're enabling, and they're actually benefiting from your caretaking, but they're so wrapped up in their own problems in their own life that they might just barely notice the issue. So this is often the classic codependent relationship, that the way that this all kind of started to come about in the 70s and the 80s, when psychologists who were working with people with alcohol addictions were noticing that the partners of the alcoholics, which they then started to label codependent people, were actually enabling the alcohol addiction to continue in their partner. Again, unconsciously most of the time. But because this person, the codependent person, is so caretaking and always trying to fix and rescue the other person, it was actually enabling the alcohol addiction to continue. Again, people are usually not doing this intentionally, but this is what ends up happening. And so, back then, that the classic codependent was usually with a alcohol addicted person or a substance abuse individual. So this is a really good slide to just kind of summarize a lot of what I've already been talking about. So we're not going to spend, we're not going to do deep dive here. This is kind of repeating, but this is a good slide for you to maybe take a screenshot, or, kind of just print this out, or something, because it's a really good summary. And I also really like how it kind of shows you healthy relationships over here on the left and then codependency on the right. So in healthy relationships, we get our self-worth from within. Best case scenario, when you enter into a relationship, you actually feel really good about yourself. You have a healthy level of self-love, self-worth, self-esteem, pretty confident person. And you're not seeking externally, right? This is on the other side here. You're not constantly seeking externally for external approval for your self-worth. Healthy relationships are reciprocal. They're a balance of giving and receiving. It might not be a balance sort of equally every single day, but in the long haul of the relationship, there is a balance of giving and receiving. Codependency, on the other hand, is just giving, 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 giving until you're completely empty and burnt out. If it leads to total burnout and exhaustion, then sometimes people will slip into resentment and, acting like a martyr. Healthy relationships have a basis of secure attachment, ideally for both partners, whereas codependency is usually the anxious attachment individual, avoidant attachment individual. Everybody, by the way, can move towards secure attachment. I know that the way that we use these labels are kind of like, people are like, oh, I'm anxious attachment, I'm avoidant attachment. It's almost like the trap here is to not assign these as fixed labels, because everybody can move towards secure attachment. I'm going to cover this a little bit more in depth when we get to the healing part. Healthy relationships, you have empathy for your partner's feelings. Codependency, you're completely consumed by your partner's feelings. This one in particular, I'm going to cover this when we get into the what to do about it. Healthy relationships, you have a healthy sense of self. You know yourself. You're an individual person. You have a strong sense of who you are. Ideally, you're connected to your purpose, your mission. You have passions. You have outside friends. Whereas codependency, you just completely lose yourself. Healthy relationships, you have strong, healthy boundaries. And codependency, weak boundaries or no boundaries. Boundaries is something I'm going to get into as we move forward. Healthy relationships, both people refuse to be mistreated. They expect to be treated with love and respect. They know that this is something they deserve. Whereas codependency, often these are victims of abuse and mistreatment. Healthy relationships, you have a balance of togetherness and time apart. Okay. Codependency, constantly together, joined at the hip and meshed in each other's lives. Hard time separating. Healthy relationships, healthy sex life, but not the primary thing. Codependency, sex and intense chemistry may be the focus, and in some cases is literally the only thing holding it together. Not a good sign if this is the case. Healthy relationships, you have this overall trust and security in life. So security is an important word here, because not only do you have secure attachment, right? But even like beyond relationships, you feel good about your life. You trust your life. You have this bigger sense that, okay, my life has meaning. My life has purpose. Ideally, you have a relationship with something higher, a spiritual, connection to something bigger, and you trust your life. Whereas codependency, there is always this fear of rejection and abandonment. You do not trust other people. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust God. You don't trust your life. And it's always, this is sort of this vibration of just, not really, ultimately, it's kind of like not really liking or trusting your life. And it's kind of more of victim mentality. Now, this is completely understandable where a lot of this comes from. We're going to get into where this comes from. I think it's the next slide. And so we want to have compassion for all of these things. And we want to clearly understand where they come from so that we can heal the root cause and move forward. Healthy relationships, we allow other people to actually take ownership, take self-responsibility of their life. Codependency, it's that over involvement, sort of, the rescuer, the fixer thing, and then sometimes can even lead to resentment for being responsible for other people without being able to actually turn towards yourself and see, oh my goodness, I'm actually creating this dynamic. Healthy relationship, there's a healthy interest and love in the other person without going overboard. Whereas codependency, there's often obsession, infatuation. You cannot stop thinking about this person. They're always in your head. Okay. Okay, so let's just take a moment to stretch. That was a lot. I know that was a lot. You can actually take a pause if you want to, just get up, move around. I don't have the time in front of me, but it's probably been like an hour. So this is where we start to transition into understanding, where does this all come from? Where is the root cause of codependency, of relationship addiction, of insecure attachment? There's two sources where it comes from. The first source, which we're going to talk about in this slide, is childhood trauma or dysfunctional family systems. The other source is cultural programming, movies, songs, music, media, social media, all this stuff on the external that kind of shapes us and influences us. So when it comes from childhood trauma or dysfunctional family systems, this can come about in children because of homes that are just, they're insecure places, homes with substance abuse, homes with physical or emotional abuse, sexual abuse. And so these are kind of the heavy hitters up here. This is what most of us would kind of label trauma, okay? But like when I move on to just speaking about, it can also be caused by lack of nurturing supportive relationships that involve healthy, genuine connection and communication. This is sort of like, I guess you could say, a lower level than something a little more extreme, like up here. But both of them can cause codependency. And speaking about denial as well, I do see a lot of people who come to me and they don't understand where this came from, and they swear that they don't have any trauma from their childhood. And I think that's because there's a little bit of a misconception that trauma has to be kind of like these big, obvious events. And you may or may not want to label some of this stuff trauma over here. But regardless, as a result of less than healthy relationships and sort of dysfunctional family, patterns or systems, we're all shaped and molded very profoundly by this. And so this is the root cause of so much of it. So basically, if you think about really just distilling codependency back to this core issue, which is that we end up feeling like there's a void internally, and we need to seek externally to fill that void. Ultimately, what is that? That's a lack of self-love. It's a lack of self-worth, low self-esteem, low confidence. And so therefore we are addicted to seeking externally to prove to ourselves that we're worthy. And so this is super, super common. I mean, I would say it's so sad to say, but the vast majority of people, because of less than perfect childhoods, usually have some of this. So it's very, very common. And so before I get to this part, this is where caretaking comes from. Just to stay on any sort of messaging, any sort of trauma, experience, conditioning that you went through in your life that has sent you the message that you are not worthy, that you are not good enough, that you are less than, tied into comparison culture. So many people are walking around thinking that they're not good enough in a variety of ways, shapes, and forms. So this can all cause codependency. This is something that very easily develops. And then when I get to the next slide, to layer on top of that all of the cultural programming that continues to keep it in place. Whenever we're watching movies, listening to music, watching TV that is just modeling and blasting codependency at us, that all serves to just keep all of this in place and running internally. Not a good situation. So that's why I am just so grateful to be able to shine a light with you on all of this, because it's almost like once you start to really understand what this is and see it with clear eyes, it's almost like you're going to start to see it literally everywhere. You're going to start to see it in your friends, in your family, literally everywhere. And I know it's not comfortable sometimes, but I would much rather have you see the truth than to not see the truth and then just continue to just be spiraling in this dysfunctional way of relating. And the best thing is that there's a way out, and I'll show you how. So the caretaking component often comes, this is sort of, I wanted to just spend some time on just this basic understanding that if you had any damage to your self-love and your self-worth, which all of us do along the way for whatever reason, right? Even if it didn't happen at home, maybe at school you had friendships that eroded your self-esteem. And so this is where codependency can come from. When it gets into the caretaking fixer rescuer thing, this is when often the child learns to put their needs to the side due to a parent's needs. So if they see that the mother or the father is overwhelmed, overly stressed out, maybe has substance abuse problems, whatever it is that the child is witnessing, that they need to become small, really not have any needs themselves, because they unconsciously understand that their parent is overwhelmed and doesn't have the resources to be able to be a strong, solid caretaker where they can act, where the child can actually have needs and have those needs be met. In order to survive, they must learn to be the good girl or boy, and they become whatever is needed of them. They end up rescuing others, rescuing mothers, fathers, right? Not just in childhood, but then this carries over into their adult lives. And then this can lead to people pleasing, approval seeking, loss of sense of self, having a hard time speaking your truth, speaking your needs, even having needs at all. One of the saddest things when I work with people and we talk about, what are you looking for in a relationship, right? What are your needs in relationships? Sometimes they have no idea what their needs are because they have been so overly fixated on other people and tending to other people's needs at the expense of themselves that they're absolutely not in touch with their needs. So that's a pretty extreme form of codependency. So as I've been saying all along, codependent relationships are also programmed into us by movies, music, social media, all around us. Especially for women, we are taught that we are nothing without a man, without a partner. And we're also taught that we must be the caretakers, the nurturers, self-sacrificing of other people at the expense of our own needs. And of course, it's so beautiful to embody these feminine characteristics of nurturing, love, care, support. But we also need to come from a foundation of healthy self-love and healthy boundaries. All the mothers know this one, hopefully, because it's really true. I know it's very overused, but you just can't give from an empty cup. It's absolutely not possible. You will burn yourself into the ground. You will develop health problems. People who have chronic fatigue, thyroid problems, adrenal fatigue, all things I've had in my own life. I just wanted to kind of highlight that. Start to look at the psychological component and the relationship component of this to see how these things can be playing into it. And so women especially are socialized to believe that they're only half a person without a partner. Still huge to this day. Okay, the big picture here, and then we're going to move into how to actually overcome. If you could boil this down to the one thing that I want you to take away from this, the root of this is, I've already said this many times before, the root of this is a void within yourself due to low self-love, low self-worth, low confidence, low self-esteem, that drives us to seek approval, validation, and self-worth externally. Where do we do that? Relationships. And beware if you have people-pleasing tendencies, it's the same thing. If you have anxious attachment, same thing. If you're an empath and you get involved with narcissistic people who take, same thing. Love addiction, same thing. And yes, we want to show up in the world loving ourselves without needing proof from the external world. We're strong and solid in our sense of self, and we do not depend on the external world to tell us that we're worthy. And so this really involves us showing up authentically in the world, fully as our true unhidden selves. Who are you really at the core? Authenticity is something that is really, this term being authentic is thrown around. This goes so deep. This goes so deep. The work I do with clients is rooted in a lot of Carl Jung's work and his path of individuation, which in my eyes is the path of true authenticity. Because for those of you who aren't familiar with his path of individuation, it basically, he's taking you from the false self to the true self, and it's a path. The first step on that path is realizing that we have a persona, or, this sort of external facade that isn't truly us. And so for people who have codependent tendencies, oftentimes that persona is being a people pleaser, being so good, right? You're so good, you're so giving. And yet it's so crazy, but sometimes people this it's so cringy for me to say this. Sometimes people don't like you and are not attracted to you. This is like me back in the day, because you're just not that interesting. And this is not who you truly are, okay? This is a very important point. If you are a people pleaser, if you are tiptoeing around and shape-shifting yourself into what you think everyone wants you to be, first of all, a lot of people can see through that, and they can feel when people are being authentic and when they're not. Second of all, people actually are really drawn to people who are, number one, have a solid sense of themselves, who are very comfortable as their authentic, unique individual expression. These are the people that are the most magnetic and most charismatic in the world, especially when it's coming from true authenticity, which is definitely tied into having healthy, strong levels of self-love and self-worth, self-respect. Okay, these are the people that people are drawn to. When you're a people pleaser, sometimes it annoys other people because they can tell, right? I'm talking to myself like 10 years ago. So I know all of this is a hard pill to swallow, but it's really just me trying to gently encourage you to stop doing all this people pleasing. Because if it hasn't already in your life, it will backfire. In my life, it completely collapsed literally everything in my life. So when you go through something hard like that, I can't even ever go back. I can't ever go back to that old way of being, because you learn the hard way sometimes. All right, I'm just going to take a quick pause to get some water, because we're going to head into this second half now of what can we do about it? How can we heal this? How can we move forward? This is where I get excited because, oh my God, there's so much available to us here when we get to the other side. Okay, so, there's no way that I can actually tell you, because this is just a teaching video. I cannot tell you how long it's going to take you to heal from codependency. But what I will tell you for reference is that for me, I was in a 2-year, really intense period where the vast majority of my heavy lifting was done. Now, that was crisis mode. My marriage had collapsed. It was a dark time. Now, 2 years to some of you might seem like a long time. However, don't forget, we were together for almost 20 years. So I had a lot to unravel. This was years and years ago, I had never done consistent therapy before, so I had never tackled any of my childhood stuff. So lots was done in that 2 years, and then I really pretty viscerally came up and out of the darkness, and my whole life was changed. Now, this was 10 years ago for me, and the work is never done. I have been on the path now for 10 years. I've discovered modalities like breath work and other healing modalities beyond therapy that have completely transformed my life even more. And so, every single day I am practicing, and so I just want to say, I don't know how long it's going to take. However, if this is something that you're just starting to unravel, wow, you can probably make pretty significant progress pretty quickly. Okay, I really am a firm believer that you don't need to be in therapy for years and years and years. The people that come to me, we laser focus on what they need to work on. And within 3 to 6 months for most of my clients, they have completely changed. This is also because I combine therapy with breath work, which is a healing modality that I use to speed up the process. I also use intuitive guidance, and the fact that I've been doing this for, over 13 years at this point makes me very, very good at being able to very quickly see and spot patterns for people. So if you want to reach out to me, you can if you don't have a therapist. If you need a therapist, make sure, and you find somebody, make sure that you really intentionally say, I want to focus on healing codependency. You can also say, I want to focus on healing insecure attachment. Okay, these are some things that you can bring to very intentionally work on with people, because some therapists will just show up week after week with you and just let you talk about whatever. And you could be in therapy for years and years and years. This is something that I've spoken about quite a bit that I don't agree with in the field. I'm very targeted with people. And so the first thing that we can do to heal, as I've been saying, deep therapy and healing the core wounds. So when I talked about the childhood stuff a few slides back and where this all comes from, every single person watching this, you have your own unique story of where, tracing it back to the original core wounds in childhood. That's where we go. We have to heal those parts. There's specific methods that we use to go back and heal those child parts that were wounded. And we're all carrying those parts of us and those wounds into our adult relationships. So we need to go back to the root and the source. As I said before, healthy self-love and really making sure that we're full, we're whole, we love ourselves, we have confidence, literally the foundation of everything. So for many of my clients, this work of healing the core wounds, the goal to everything is healing so that we love ourselves fully and we accept ourselves fully. Many of the treatment programs for codependency, in fact, the vast majority of them, all have a component where opening up to something higher is a huge key. Okay, so in addition to you being able to source self-love from yourself internally rather than externally, you also understand and know that your true source is from something higher than you. Okay, so I have a great podcast episode that I want to share with you all. This is actually a good one for this particular presentation. It's with my friend Erin Telford. She's a fellow breathwork teacher. And gosh, I forgot the name of it. It has something to do with, oh man, I forgot the name of it, but I will post it in the link in the description to this video. And she speaks about how there's this moment, there's a really powerful moment in that episode where she speaks about when she realized that she basically kind of had this awakening moment of like, I'm so sorry, God. I'm so, so sorry, right? That I wasn't loving myself fully. Like, I'm so, so sorry. Once you have this understanding that we are all souls here that are a reflection of the divine, and when we are creations of God and the bigger thing, I'm getting chills. Having low levels of self-love, hating parts of yourself is not compatible with this true understanding that you are a creation of something bigger, that you have been placed here on this earth for a specific reason. Your soul is here to learn specific lessons, to grow and evolve, and to heal. And for many of us, we have a mission to do something bigger with our lives. When you really understand that, hating yourself, having low self-confidence, is those two things can't coexist with each other. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to touch more upon this spirituality piece in a little bit. Also, we can stop giving our power away to other people and really come home to self. This has to do with that over-giving, over-involvement in everyone else's lives. And it's almost like you're literally pulling all of your energy back into yourself. This, for many people, it requires that you push the pause button. So much of the treatment for codependency is actually taking a break from dating and relationships. And I'm not necessarily saying that you have to do that, but there is a part where you have to actually push the pause button on everything that you've been doing and just sort of unconsciously doing in your life to be able to start to realize what you're doing and come way, way back to self. Another thing that we do when we are healing from codependency, we make sure that we do not put other people on pedestals. This is not a good thing. This is basically, by definition, you are saying this person is up here, therefore they are better than me. Therefore, I have to be down here. I am lower than them. I have to look up to them, and everything about them is just better than me. That in and of itself is creating and reinforcing your low levels of self-love. Pedestalizing, first of all, many people don't like how that feels when you actually do put them on a pedestal, because they're like, hey, I'm human, right? And the other thing that can happen is that if you put somebody on a pedestal, oftentimes what happens is that that person ends up being knocked off the pedestal for whatever reason, because they're human, right? And they're not perfect. And then for you, that is absolutely crushing and devastating and can be the hardest thing for you to digest. And this is something where we have to really understand that we are the ones who are doing this. It's because of our pedestalization and, having these illusions about people that is actually creating that, not the other person. We also have to really clear out addiction energy, and this can involve energy clearing. I'm going to get into that. And then really developing secure attachment, which is something that can absolutely happen. I mean, I came from disorganized attachment, which is like one of the hardest things to heal, okay, because it's coming from a childhood where there's quite a lot of trauma. Disorganized attachment, again, is a little bit of both anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. Wherever you are, I promise you can head towards secure attachment, okay? I have found that with very targeted work with clients, within 3 to 6 months, we can move you towards secure attachment. And I actually have an assessment that I use with clients to measure their progress. Part of developing secure attachment is actually developing healthy boundaries. I'm going to talk about that in more detail. All of these points we're going to kind of get into slide by slide. The last thing here is practicing the dance of union and separation. This is a kind of a phrase that I coined, 5-6 years ago, where I found that one of the most practical ways that you can actually heal from codependency is to very consciously with your partner practice this, I call it the dance of coming together, being together, experiencing, intimacy and closeness, and also separating out into your own energy. Okay. And so it's like this, and it's a balance, right? It's a balance of both. I'm going to show you how in a little bit. Okay. So for the 100th time, healing self-love and self-worth is really, really the key, the core of everything. This quote by Jody Hayes is so good. And so she says there's a direct connection between your level of self-esteem and your choice of men. Oh my goodness. If you're a man watching, it's the same thing, right? Same thing for you. Excuse me. Many people get triggered when they understand, or maybe they haven't understood yet, but they might get triggered by this idea that your life right now and the people that you choose to be in relationship with, especially your significant other, if it's not going well, all of this is a reflection of your internal state and your love for yourself. I would have hated hearing this years ago, so I understand if this is triggering. But if you can get over the sting of this, the solution is embedded in what she has to share here. The solution is to heal your relationship with yourself, to come back to yourself, to humbly admit that you don't have healthy levels of loving yourself. Okay. And you have oftentimes put up with way less than you deserve in relationships. Okay. Very, very hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. And it is the key to liberation and to healing yourself. I can promise you that. I have chills right now because this is something I had to do in my own life. So to move into healthy self-love and self-worth, we must go back to the original wounds from childhood, as I've been speaking about. These original wounds are where we learn to abandon ourselves, make ourselves small, got messages that we weren't worthy, to believe, thinking that we aren't worthy of healthy love, thinking that we have to accept breadcrumbs and mistreatment, all of these things that cause us to put other people on a pedestal, thinking that we need to show up and, fix and help other people in order to be useful and worthy, all the same thing. So this is a big one, and it's hard for me because, again, this is a teaching video. I can't tell you, the person watching, where all this started for you. Okay, so you're going to have to, really work with somebody to pinpoint where this all came from so that you can start to heal and so that you can start to develop healthy self-worth. But this is like the key here. I put a star next to this one. So in addition to really going back and healing those original wounds, those original traumas, the original conditioning, I often layer on top, as I was saying before, learning healthy relationship skills, which the vast majority of people do not know how to be in a healthy relationship. They weren't taught this. They were not modeled this. And many people who have codependent tendencies, as we've been saying, they have low self-worth from childhood wounds. And then this actually gets maintained in adulthood because then they sort of carry this difficulty with relationships into adulthood. And then they end up being in dysfunctional relationships in adulthood, which then further erodes their self-esteem. And so what I'm saying here is that they never actually learn healthy relationship skills. So when I work with people, and even if you're watching and you have your own therapist, make sure that you're taking a multi-layered approach to healing. You want to go back and heal the root causes and the trauma. And simultaneously, you want to learn and practice healthy relationship skills in your life right now, every single day, with all the people in your life. Even if you're single and you don't have a partner, I say this all the time. You can and should practice healthy relationship skills with your friends, with your family, with everybody around you right now, okay? This will allow you to build confidence over time, which will both bolster self-love and self-worth along the way. And so it's kind of this feedback loop that will increase your confidence in relationships as you move forward. Conscious Loving is my favorite relationship book to learn healthy relationship skills. It also has the added benefit of taking you even higher into what I call the second level, which is conscious relationships. In the model that I created, the first level is healthy, strong, solid, basic relationship skills. Level 2 in the model I created is conscious relationships, which is basically how to start to work with relationships consciously, okay, with thought, with care, with awareness, to be able to use them as a vehicle for healing, growth, and evolution. Level 3 in the model I created is divine union or spiritual partnership. I don't have time to get into those today because we're really focusing on sort of the core of developing secure, healthy relationships today. Okay, this is where we get into the tie-in to spirituality and how this can actually be an incredibly powerful way to heal for many people who have codependency. So Pia Melody says, codependence either makes someone else their higher power or they attempt to be another person's higher power. So huge. Again, the solution is really stated in this statement. We need to stop doing that, and we need to actually go straight to the source, develop a relationship with God, spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call it. Okay. When you develop a true spiritual practice, I say that because so many people call themselves spiritual these days. They literally, when I talk to them, they do not have any relationship to the higher thing. They might meditate, they might go to retreats, and they think that's spiritual, but they have no direct connection or faith or trust in the bigger thing. Right. And so like, this is not to make anyone feel bad, but this is huge, huge. When you develop a true spiritual practice and a genuine connection to God, you will receive true spiritual nourishment, true spiritual fulfillment. And there's no replacement for that. We cannot have that desire filled externally from any other person. It will never be a proper substitute. It will never be. Never make any other person your God, your everything. Okay, so before we go into this one, I just want to go back really quick and just say, this one can be overwhelming for some people. You know, if you feel like you do not have a relationship with something higher than you, then this could be a great opportunity for you to just start to open yourself up to that. Maybe there is something greater. For some people, this could be their first step on a spiritual exploration, and that's incredible. Okay. For other people that might have a lot of resistance to this, couple things I'll say. Number one, just look at your resistance. If you have a history of religious programming or trauma, I really get it. And there can be a recovery process there to heal yourself. There is such a thing as religious trauma. Everybody deserves to have a relationship with something higher on their own terms. So just look at your resistance and see if it's coming from actual trauma, then that's what needs to be healed in order for you to open to something bigger. For some people who literally have no interest, that's totally your free will, and that's totally fine. I would say, is it possible for you to heal from codependency without opening to a higher power? I would say probably, but it's going to be harder for you. This is something that is very, very important. And so oftentimes, if I work with clients who don't actually have a belief, faith, trust, or openness to something higher, often, I see that their progress, they make progress in certain areas, but there's something core or fundamental that is missing. And these individuals often have to work harder at the day-to-day reminders and pulling themselves back to self-love, checking their thoughts, checking, like it's like a day-to-day, every single day they have to sort of do all these things. Whereas people who do have a genuine faith and trust and connection to something higher, oftentimes there is, the word awakening is overused, but often it really illuminates something inside of them where they just get it. And they don't have to do all of this work on loving themselves and accepting themselves, because there's something higher that has kind of switched internally. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so another thing that we can do to heal codependency, we must correct overgiving and abandoning ourselves. So just noticing with clear eyes how you're overgiving, how you're kind of over involved in other people's lives, and how you're under receiving. Is it hard for you to receive? Can you actually start to practice this now in all of your relationships? Like I said before, a lot of my clients actually have to give them assignments to do in their relationships and their friendships to start to soften and pull back. And first admit to themselves that they might not have it all together. They might actually need a helping hand here and there, and to be able to practice asking for help, letting themselves receive. For people who have a hard time with this is something that I'm still working on. You know, we have to ask ourselves, is it easier for us to give? Well, yes, it's actually much less vulnerable to show up and give than to be like, hey, I need help, right? When you receive, we often have this correlation in our mind that makes us weak. We must be needy, right? These are things that are huge. And this is, you know, speaking of healing original wounds, and doing shadow work to really see what's in the unconscious that's driving a lot of this. If you're somebody that is repulsed or annoyed when you see neediness, this is something that I definitely had to overcome. I was able to trace it back to a very, very vivid memory when I was a baby, and how I was actually ignored and neglected in a time of need, you know, when I was crying and hungry and needed support. Baby stuff, right? And so when we get the message that we are not worthy, that this is inconvenient, sometimes we can actually, that gets installed into us as a belief. And then as we go through life, we can actually carry that same belief towards other people. Huge. Okay. So all of this is, you can trace it all back. Okay. And none of us have to be slaves to any of this. All of this is able to be healed. Okay. It's a combination of healing the core wounds and the trauma, and also in real time practicing stretching our muscles. Okay. It has to be a combination of both. So we can ask ourselves in our relationships, can we strike a balance and have reciprocity? Is this possible? Can you move towards this? It's not going to happen overnight, but have this as a goal and start to move towards it. Okay. Can you understand and accept that some of your relationships might actually need to be released, or maybe they'll change in some way, right? If they're not able to handle that reciprocity. This is just a truth sometimes, especially with these relationships where codependency is very much running the show, and one person is over giving and the other person's happily receiving without showing up to give back to you. Those relationships are probably going to struggle. We must stop caretaking others at the expense of our own well-being. We also deserve to receive. Deserving to receive is directly tied into your ability to love yourself and to see that you're worthy, okay, of being able to receive. Okay, so this slide is going to be really important for a lot of people to understand, to sit with. Okay, this is a big one for women again. Men do this too, but it's more common with women. So there's a huge difference that we need to learn, the difference between caretaking and caring and caretaking. Caring is encouraging other people to grow, but knowing that your primary responsibility is to yourself and your recovery, especially if you're codependent. On the other hand, caretaking is acting like a parent to a child. You overstep your boundaries and really kind of, you know, act like a fixer, rescuer, over-involved helper, taking away the other person's opportunity for them to step up to the plate in their life, for them to take ownership, for them to take personal responsibility and act like an adult in charge of their own life. When we do this with other people, this actually harms them in the long run because it takes away their power and their ability to actually become strong and resilient in life. Learning skills, learning how to become an adult, learning how to become a mature individual requires that we actually face hard things, that we actually face bumps in the road, get through challenges. And that's how we actually build strength, resilience, and maturity. The opposite of this, just relating it to parenting here, is when we constantly are saving our children from any little bit of discomfort. Just picture a parent who is helping the child to learn how to walk, right? You can't hold on to them forever. They have to actually be able to start to practice and literally like build those muscles to actually become strong enough to stand up on their own. And they're not going to be able to do that if you're always doing it for them. We all know this, we know this, but unfortunately, this is how we show up in terms of our behavior, both with our actual children when it's not appropriate to continue to do that, and with our romantic relationships and sometimes our friendships as well. And so caretaking is synonymous with enabling people's behavior, enabling people to just stay stuck in dependency. And it can also feel smothering to some people, although some people unconsciously enjoy it because then they don't actually have to show up for their own lives and put the work in. So this concept of loving detachment can be very, very helpful in relation to that last slide. It's a phrase from Al-Anon that's really perfect for people who tend to be this way. It doesn't mean that you stop caring about somebody or caring for somebody, but it does mean that you unhook from compulsively taking responsibility for them and overdoing it, okay, in the relationship. You're affording them the respect and the dignity to think for themselves, feel their own feelings, make their own choices and decisions. And it means not desperately needing this constant enmeshment, involvement, obsession over someone else's life. And it really does mean restoring the balance of you taking care of your own needs first and foremost, while absolutely having care and compassion for another person. And it's also an understanding of your needs versus the other person's needs versus our needs if you're in a relationship. Those are three very different things. And so you can start to tell yourself, I love and I care about whoever it is, but I do not take responsibility for their problem, whatever that might be. Okay, this is really big. Now, I understand that the line can be very blurry for some people, but at the same time, I have faith and trust that many people listening will be able to understand this idea of over-involvement, especially since I've been speaking about it quite a bit. And there are things that you can probably start to do now to pull back a little bit. Additionally, I'll say it time and time again, this is a great way to start to get support from a therapist or a support person to be able to help you understand what the appropriate balance is. Understanding the drama triangle, which is this triangle where there's a victim, a rescuer, and a persecutor. Okay, this is the drama triangle, also called the victim triangle. This is really, really big and very, very helpful to understand if you're overcoming codependency, because in that triangle, a lot of codependent people are in the rescuer position. So there's an excellent article by Lynn Forrest. If you're one of my clients watching this, you already know because I send it to everybody. But this article is a deep, deep dive in the drama triangle, understanding where each of these spots come from, understanding that we each kind of rotate through these spots in our lives, sometimes in the course of a day. And it's a sobering look at the interactions between these three kind of positions. and how we can all rotate. And so just search for Lynn Forrest, 3 Faces of Victim. On Google, you can also just reach out to me for the link. This is really important. Once you start to understand the drama triangle, you are going to see it everywhere. It is literally everywhere. And I believe that the drama triangle is a way to keep us totally trapped and chained into these lower levels of relating, lower levels of consciousness. The vast majority of people are stuck in this, and we don't have to be. There is a way out. And once you understand it, transcending the drama triangle is one of the big keys that I really believe is a key to the evolution of humanity and to relationships in general. Once we can understand how to step out of it, huge, huge. And you can see this playing out all around us on the world stage. So please, please, please look for this article and read it. Okay, understanding co-creation. This is something that I spoke about a little bit earlier, right? 2 people coming together, forming the relationship itself, which is kind of this third thing. This was literally one of the biggest keys that I learned in my own recovery. Hardest pill that I had to swallow, as I shared before. But when my therapist was able to show me that, oh my gosh, it's not just him doing all these bad things to me. What I was bringing to the table was low levels of self-esteem, no boundaries, literally no consequences, staying with this person for almost 20 years, all this stuff, right? I could just list a million things that she helped me to be able to see, not because she wanted me to feel bad about myself, but because those were the pieces that I needed to own in order to completely overhaul and heal my life and my relationships. Literally my greatest blessing. So yes, some of this is a hard pill to swallow, and it's literally your key to liberation. Okay. So we must find the middle way between not taking total responsibility for the relationship, totally collapsing and blaming ourselves. And then the other extreme, I spoke a little bit about this earlier, not solely pointing the finger outwards. So I see many people who are at either extreme here. So it's very black and white. And the truth is, by definition, a relationship is 2 people coming together. So we must accept and own our part while simultaneously allowing the other person to own their part too. This is how you start to move into conscious relationships. People who truly practice conscious relationships understand this. And they understand that both people have to own their part. Okay. So when you can practice conscious relationships, both people are aware of this and they know how to own their stuff every step of the way. Wouldn't that be incredible? This is totally possible. You can practice relationships in this way, I promise you. Sometimes people do need to be held accountable for their behaviors. This doesn't have to be harsh, but it's simply stating the truth. I say this last part for people who find it extremely hard to actually tell other people, hey, that doesn't feel good. These are the people that find it very hard to actually speak truth to people. And these are the people that tend to collapse and just blame themselves for everything that's happening. Must understand co-creation. Okay, huge. Okay, the energy of addiction and clearing it this is kind of a big topic. This gets into energetics and energy clearing. There's an episode that I'm going to link in the description on the podcast called The War on Love, Sex, and Relationships, which, yeah, that's a big episode. That was a hard episode for me to record, but I share my personal story about how I actually used energy clearing to clear myself of this energy of addiction that came from childhood sexual abuse and all of the stuff that I was running, codependency, relationship addiction, all of this stuff, right, it kind of is the same. I say here, the energy of addiction is the same, no matter what the addiction is. Okay, it's all the same. It's an energy of compulsion and obsession that controls you. It keeps you chained to an object of desire. So you're completely run by that thing. It keeps you feeling that you have a hole or a void inside yourself that is constantly needing to be filled in order for you to feel comfortable or okay. All right, this is the energy of addiction. Along with healing the root cause through psychological shadow work, you should also work on the energetic level to clear this energy through breath work, visualization, prayer, shamanic work, etc. Okay, this slide is I needed to include it here because it was absolutely one of the missing pieces in my life. I had done years and years and years and years of therapy, and it was all very helpful, and I had to. But once I actually started to incorporate breath work, which basically helps you to clear your energy, at least the kind that I do, it completely changed my life. I get into the story around this in that episode called The War on Love, Sex, and Relationships. And so you'll understand. I don't have time today to get deep into this, but just know that in addition to working on a psychological level with your therapist, you also need to energetically, in your energetic field, your biofield, okay, your energetic field, aura, whatever you want to call it. Okay, this is where the subconscious resides in the energetic field. And the subconscious is what pulls things into our life. Okay. When people talk about the subconscious is really running the show, it's not a joke. This is true. So you have to actually clear it. Not only do you have to heal it on the subconscious level, but you have to clear some of this energy, the addiction of energy as well. This is a big one. It might raise a lot of questions. Please just reach out to me if you have questions. I knew I wasn't going to have time to do a deep dive into this one, but I know some of you are going to understand what I'm saying. If you have extra questions, listen to the episode. It's going to help answer them. Or you can just reach out and I'll give you some more information. Okay, this is another thing that you can start to practice, going slow with new relationships or dating and building trust over time. So big for so many people. One characteristic of codependency is that people can fall prey to really quick, fast connections full of chemistry. Spoke about this earlier. And they need to actually slow it down. They need to get to know the person over time. It's very beneficial to create that time and space, okay, to get to know somebody over time. Having boundaries and discipline with yourself is a really good muscle to build here. In fact, I would say it's required in order for recovery. It can also feel better for the other person versus quickly becoming obsessed and overwhelming them, smothering them with lots of attention at the very beginning. This is a process for you of really being able to kind of become the observer of that part of you that wants it all right now. This is the addiction energy also playing in here. Impulse control problems and not being able to slow down and just take it one day at a time, especially at the beginning. It's very, very tied into this addictive energy. And I highly recommend starting to slow it down a little bit, okay? Developing secure attachment and healthy boundaries will absolutely help you do what I just said, okay? Part of developing secure attachment is knowing we all need healthy relationships. This is a huge part of our lives, but we don't over rely on them as our one and only source of happiness and fulfillment. It's a balance of closeness with other people, also pulling back into the self, having alone time. Attached is my favorite book that I always recommend to people for understanding your current attachment style and then moving towards secure attachment. 100% possible, as I shared earlier. This is a big thing that I work on with clients. Developing healthy boundaries is a big part of this work. We're going to get into boundaries next. So can you set boundaries with yourself and with other people to help support your recovery from codependency? I want you to really sit with that, okay? Boundaries 101. This is an area of need for the vast majority of clients I work with. I know most of you have a general understanding of boundaries, but it's basically just kind of how we allow other people to treat us, okay? Having clarity in your mind. How do I want to be treated in relationships, right? How is it yeah, how do I deserve to be treated in my relationship? Sometimes for some people who have no idea, this is something where you really just need to take a moment to sit with yourself and really ask yourself, how do I want to be treated in my relationships? Okay. Can be different for everybody. However, I would say for most people, start here. I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect in all my relationships. Okay. This is like bottom line, sort of one that you can use to build off of. This is like a basic thing that everybody deserves. Okay. Boundaries are the limits or the rules that we set with ourselves and other people and how we deserve to be treated. So, what is and is not okay with us. This is a huge area to work with, but just start to define internally to yourself what your boundaries are in your relationship on a basic level using this example above as a springboard. Okay. Boundaries are huge. This is a huge area I work on with clients, not only getting clear on what their boundaries are and how they want to be treated, but also how do you uphold them in your relationships? That's a huge aspect too. Not only do I know how I want to be treated, but when I'm out there actually relating with other people, am I upholding my boundaries? This is a big one. Okay. Big area of support with clients. So, how to love open-heartedly, I really like to kind of just put this in there quickly because all of this is a balance. When you are recovering from codependency, it does not mean that you need to completely end all relationships and become a hermit. We want to find the middle way. For many people who are codependent, we have big open hearts. However, the problem comes when we actually love somebody in order to get something. That's very unconscious for many people. Okay. Sometimes people listening to this, like I said earlier, you might need to sit with that a little bit to see the truth of it. So we want to love open-heartedly. We want to love someone openly without it being transactional and doing it because you secretly want love in return. Just love fully in that moment and don't keep score. And yes, in the long term, we want reciprocity, balance, right? But if we're loving somebody in order to get love back, it's a sign that we're manipulating unconsciously to get something, pulling energy from somebody into ourselves, right? It's that thing, seeking externally. We are responsible for our own happiness and we don't put that on somebody else. So part of recovery is also questioning this idea of a soulmate, this idea that there's only one person that I'm meant to be with for the rest of my life. This person is my everything. They will make me happy. They will solve all my problems. My life will be complete. This is a huge part of my reason for living. Wow, this is a big, dangerous idea. It puts our happiness in the hands of somebody else. We feel incomplete without the other half. We're devastated and traumatized when these relationships end. These are people we thought we would be together forever. And then this can create a lot of damage, right? Walls around our hearts then when it ends, causing us to protect ourselves, shut down, or we just continue to seek externally and the addiction continues. Okay, so we have to reframe the soulmate idea. There's totally many people out there who are absolutely meant to be in our lives for various lengths of time, for various reasons. I really believe all relationships are teachers and we can learn and grow from each and every person that we're with, not just romantically, but friends, children, right? Everybody is there for a reason. That's what I believe. So if we're meant to be with some people for short periods of time, others for longer, and if it lasts forever, that's great. But there's never a guarantee of this. This is very, oh my gosh, this one's very difficult for people because that programming is so intense of you meet your person and you're together till death do us part. In this world, we have to be okay with the unknown rather than fixating on an outcome or having expectations like we will be together forever. We have to have trust in the bigger thing, in God, to provide us with the opportunities and the people that we need for healing, growth, and soul evolution, learning the lessons that we came here to learn. This is where wholehearted love comes in. You can love somebody with your whole heart without needing them to be your person, without needing them to take care of you, be responsible for your happiness, make you okay in whatever way that you think you're broken, or even have it last forever. So let me just go back for a second. The soulmate idea, this also kind of, there's a lot with the twin flame stuff, and I'll get into that later. But we have to understand that there could potentially be many soulmates in our life. Okay, this was one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn, because I really believed that my ex-husband was my soulmate until my very last day. And that wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. And even though that was a devastating time, and there's many different reasons, if I went back, that I could have corrected and he could have corrected, it had to happen that way. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if that didn't happen. And he was a soulmate at that time. We were meant to be together. We were meant to have that child together. However, it was not meant to last forever. I know that through and through, through and through. Okay, so there's some people in your life who absolutely were meant to be with you for that period of time. Okay, so this is a big one to start to really reframe this. This gets into kind of the dance of union and separation I talked about before. This is one way to bring this practice of intimacy and then separation into your romantic relationship. Most of us who have codependent tendencies, we don't have a problem with the connection, with the intimacy. We know how to do that very well. That's why here I jump straight to the separation component, okay? This is the part that's very hard for people. We need to separate from our partners energetically so that we can nurture our sense of self, our identities, our passions, our interests. Who are we separate from our partners? Very important to know yourself, okay? Also, to allow our partners to do the same exact thing. It also helps to give each other space, prevent enmeshment. Too much togetherness also damages polarity, the masculine feminine polarity that creates the sexual spark. Because when you're together all the time, you start to become one and you start to vibrate at the same frequency. So then you lose the polar opposite energies. Okay, this is why people who practice Tantra and work very consciously with the masculine feminine polarity and the spark either live apart or they have separate bedrooms so that they can actually create very consciously the separation component that I'm talking about, so that it keeps it really, really hot. Okay, not everyone has to do this. This is just an example of how it can be done. We also become way more interesting and attractive partners when we practice this, right? Absence makes the heart grow fonder. When you actually preserve your sense of self, this is the reason why you were attracted to each other in the first place, because you were two separate people who have lots to offer and you're excited about life and you have your passions. Okay, preserving that is very important to really have a relationship stick over the long haul, because you keep yourself an interesting and attractive partner on both sides. So again, your relationship should not be your only source of happiness. Get grounded in your life purpose, your work, your destiny. Don't lose sight of that. Please don't ditch your friends, your family, your hobbies. Okay, hugely important to keep these intact. And sure, you can spend time with friends and your partner all together, but make sure that you also do it separately. Maintain those relationships separately away from your partner. Also, make sure that you have a network of people around you so you're not over-reliant on one person for everything. Cultivate your own hobbies and interests, pursue them regularly, take intentional time away, okay, time with your friends, family, self-care, alone time, solo trips, creative activities. Get comfortable with alone time and really ask yourself if you need to be around other people all the time, including your partner. Is there something that you're running away from with yourself? Okay, is that hard for you to be with yourself? And with all of this, encourage your partner to do the same. Have it just be a normal thing in the relationship. I've already spoken about this so much, but develop a network around you. Take stock of your relationships at large. Take small steps to create a network or an inner circle of people, if you don't already have this, that you can trust and who model healthy relationships for you. And also that feel supportive of you and your recovery with codependency. Be patient and give yourself time if this is hard for you or new for you. And just know you don't need to have a million friends, okay? Even if you just have a few close ones, that can totally be enough. And this is also a time to start to avoid spending time with people who aren't supportive of you and these new goals that you have in relationships. So the dance of union and separation I've been talking about throughout, learning to flow between union and separation. And so you can get to the point where you're so in touch with yourself and your partner that you know when to kind of, get close and then sort of pull away, get close, pull away. It doesn't have to be, this is not the toxic push-pull thing that can happen in relationships. This is actually very consciously using a little bit of space, right? Closeness, a little bit of space, right? Don't get too caught up in making it perfect. It doesn't need to be. Just check in on the symptoms of codependency that we've been talking about and just use your intuition to know when to build in more separation time. How to choose a partner wisely. Okay, many times people who have codependent tendencies, like I said, are attracted to partners who have character deficiencies, don't treat them very well. They're troubled in some way. So we have to learn how to discern what is healthy characteristics of behavior, trustable characteristics of a person. What does that look like? So that we can actually make better choices in partners and to be able to spot red flags. This is a big one. So I have a 14-page guide on how to choose a partner wisely. The link is in my bio on Instagram, or just email me and I'll send it to you. It's very long. It takes you through all of the attributes of a person that has healthy character and is trustable and responsible. Okay. Keeping a journal of your progress is especially useful for people who tend to be hard on themselves or self-critical. It's just really helpful for you to be able to visually see evidence of your progress along the way. Okay, so this is just a quick little tip for you. Starting to wrap up now, some people believe that popular masculine feminine polarity teachings are just codependency in disguise, along with the twin flame stuff. Laura Matsu and her husband, Bernhard Gunther, have an excellent podcast episode on their Cosmic Matrix podcast about the twin flame stuff. And she really nails it about how this is basically just the anxious attached person and the avoidant attached person. Codependency and what I have been describing to you is really the same thing that's going on here. So I absolutely believe that this is true. And the popular mainstream polarity teachings that are very distorted, and I'm just going to say, masculine and feminine energies are very important to work with. And I work with them in my own life personally and with clients, but in a very different way than how it's taught popularly. When I was kind of playing around in the LA polarity scene back in 2016-ish for a couple years, this whole thing that all the codependency stuff was really being taught, right? I know I promised some people, that I was sharing on Instagram that I would share some more stories about it, but women were basically being taught to be so passive, so submissive, totally the caretakers, whereas the men, it was all just being reinforced. Really, all of what I've been talking about was being reinforced. Okay, so it was just a weird time. And now I don't really follow popular polarity teachers because I know that it's distorted. But from what I hear from my colleagues, it's still kind of happening. So yes, I do agree that it's codependency in disguise, that programming that I have been talking about. And for any of you who have made it this far, oh my goodness, anybody who's trying to break free of codependency is a hero in my eyes. This is so baked into our culture that any little steps forward that you can take will have a massive impact. Okay, so thank you for being brave enough to do this work, okay? And we all need to be free of codependency in order to have secure, healthy attachment. And this is the foundation that we all need to actually move into these higher levels of relationships that I teach about, conscious relationships and divine union. So question and answers, is it possible to heal codependency while in a codependent relationship? This is possible, but it is difficult, okay? It's going to be much easier for you to heal if you're not simultaneously in the relationship where it's happening. However, Pia Melody in her book, let me just go forward real quick. Right here, this book, Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody, she has a whole chapter, okay, for this question, where she outlines how it is actually possible to do it. So I'm going to point you to that book. She goes way in depth, but I would say, yes, it's possible to heal. Going down to this one right here, is it possible to do the work alone? This is kind of the same question. Yes, absolutely, because don't forget, by definition, that co-creation aspect is true. If you're doing the inner work, by definition, the relationship is going to change as a result of your inner work. Okay, so whether or not the other person's going to be able to actually adjust to that, we don't know. Okay, you have to try it and see. But I hope that kind of answers that question. It is possible. It's going to make it a little bit harder. Is codependency always unhealthy? I would say yes. Codependency, by definition, is a dysfunctional way of relating. However, this next question, or this next request by somebody, explain the nuance between codependency and interdependency. This, I feel like intuitively this person maybe doesn't understand the difference between codependency, which is dysfunctional, and healthy attachment, right? Healthy, secure attachment. Yes, right? Connection, intimacy, all of this is beautiful. And this is interdependency or secure attachment. But codependency itself is a dysfunctional dynamic. How do I sit in the discomfort of my partner's anger at me saying no? What is the line for what is okay and what isn't? So this is a big one. And it actually, this one right here, how do I know my boundaries? These are kind of tied together. I would say that all of the work that I've suggested up until now is going to help you. Maybe it already has helped you as you've watched it, because coming back and developing really strong, healthy self-love, self-worth, knowing that you deserve to be treated in a loving, kind, respectful way. All of that kind of is the treatment for being able to sit in the discomfort of your partner's anger, because their emotions and their feelings about it isn't actually going to sway you, because you know internally that you deserve to be treated in a certain way. Okay. What is the line for what is okay and what isn't? If this is in any way physically abusive, emotionally abusive, mentally abusive, it's not okay. So please reach out to me so that you can run some of this by me, because it's hard for me to kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes here. How do I know my boundaries? This is something where it really does take some time for you to pull back, like I said before in the boundary slides, for you to be able to really ask yourself, do that deep soul searching. What do I deserve in relationship? How do I deserve to be treated, right? When you start to heal your self-love and your self-worth, this becomes much, much more clear to you. Everyone deserves to be treated with love, care, and respect and kindness, okay? And so this is just the basic way that we should all be treating each other. So it takes a lot of soul searching. You also can look at your prior relationships to actually see and ask yourself, what in that relationship felt good to me? What didn't feel good to me, okay? What was okay with me in that relationship and what wasn't okay? This is how you can start to know your boundaries. Okay, so wrapping up, this is kind of the last slide. It's just about prioritizing your healing. So Jody Hayes says it is a highly unusual person who can recover from unhealthy relationship patterns on his or her own. Most of us need the support of professionals in order to heal. 100% true. I literally would not be here talking to you today if I didn't have my own therapist, my own support people. This is about working with unconscious patterns and our blind spots. And so Robin Norwood says, make your own recovery the first priority in your life. I continue to spend my time and my money on my support people, my ongoing support. I would much rather support my psychological health and happiness versus superficial spending, like vacations, expensive meals, clothes. Working with a professional to heal is pretty much the key here, okay? Reach out to me if you need support, find your own therapist if you need to. And it takes humility, so I really, really get it, okay? But just get real about where you're spending your time and especially where you're spending your money. And see if your spending aligns with your values and your goals and your recovery. Because on the other side of all of this, codependency, insecure attachment is a life beyond your wildest dreams. Relationships are hugely impactful. And when they're dysfunctional, our whole life is dysfunctional. And so it's worth every minute and every penny, I promise you, promise you. So just to wrap up, here's some books, okay, that I love. There's 5 books here that, you can just make note of, look them up. You don't have to get all of them, maybe just pick a couple. And then if you honestly don't have, the financial resources, look up Codependence Anonymous. This is a 12-step program, completely free. They have meetings all over the world. I think they also have virtual meetings as well. So you can start to get support literally, today with this. So to wrap up, I know this was such a long video with so much information. If you made it to the end, I'm just really giving you a big high five because this is a lot of information. But I highly encourage you maybe to watch this again in a little bit, maybe take notes. Any comments or questions, please reach out to me directly. This is something I help people with day in, day out, and I would love to support you. So if you need support, please reach out. I have a free 30-minute consultation call for anybody, anywhere in the world, can book with me and we can talk about your unique situation. There's never any pressure to work with me one-on-one. However, I'm here for you if you want to. And so we can talk all about that. And I would just love to meet you and talk more about your situation. So I'm sending you all the best. And this is something that is so able to be healed. And so there is a life beyond your wildest dreams, I promise you. Okay, I hope this was helpful and I'll talk to y'all soon.